Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome back to another album review. And today we are finally finishing the trilogy of the Babymetal albums because I got a single request and that's good enough for me because I am a shill and I know this is going to get views. Unfortunately, I don't think this is going to get very many likes because I'm just going to say straight up, the 2019 Babymetal release Metal Galaxy is their worst album. And I might get some flack for saying that. And first thing I want to say is that stylistically, the style that they were going for with the whole Metal Galaxy approach actually had a ton of potential. Like, looking at it from just an outsider point of view, I thought, oh, maybe this is going to be like Based Xanadu by Rush or any of their space rockish materials, or maybe it'll be space rock influenced. That's a huge stretch, but maybe there'd be more synths, maybe there'd be more of this. In reality, basically the major stylistic change that is attempted with this album as a whole, probably I'd say is symphonics. There's definitely more symphonics added. A lot of these songs are actually pretty bouncy. Like, I was just thinking of them and just bobbing, and I'm like, well, I guess that's the approach going for here. But unfortunately, there is also a lot of experimentation on here, which I can always appreciate as an appreciator of music. I just love hearing experimentation. The more experimental a thing is, there's actually probably a really good chance it'll appeal to me. Like, even some weird noise stuff I can just get with surely because it's different. So I definitely appreciated that approach, but as you'll see, one, it does lead to the album being kind of unfocused, where it's not like a one-off song tries to be different, it's a handful of songs tries to be different, whether it's a feature or something like that. And it's not like the Dragon Force features before where they were enhancing the material. They're a pretty mixed bag here. So other than that, I really just gotta say, just straight up, it's an unfocused album. So really the only way for me to actually approach this album with a cohesive perspective is to actually just break down the track list. So like always, let's get into that. So the album starts off with an intro track, which is fine, but this track is called Future Metal. We can already see a fault that was about the album in this very opening track. Fortunately, this fault is not repeated that many times, but it's straight up just a failure of style choice. I think a lot of this track is a little bizarre. So it's got this kind of weird hip-hop electronic drum loop. It makes no sense for Babymetal so far. And I know that they do different styles, but it just feels weird and it does not click. Of course, eventually there's this drop that hits, which then you get this really nice symphonic mesh of sounds. You get guitar and drums and these nice symphonic vocals, which are scattered throughout the album. And whenever they're there, it's honestly one of the album's best moments. So overall, I didn't like this track that much. I thought the first half was too bizarre. Also, you get Sue Metal over the top, who the vocals are very minimal. It's really just intro track, so you're only getting her really speaking a couple things over this really bizarre, like, robotic filter, saying that it's not heavy metal, it's baby metal. And I mean, I thought the whole goal was to kind of be metal-esque in the first place, but if this album's going for the baby metal style that hasn't been done before, this is probably the least effective way of sort of opening that up. Fortunately, we're approached with a pretty hard-hitting track that follows this with Dada Dance. And if the baby metal style that was explained in the first track was to come into fruition, I think its best example would be here. And it sort of shows a divergence between two major styles that this album hits that is very strong. There's the symphonic style, and then there's the more J-pop mesh style. And at some senses, it could sound like music from Initial D, and I know you've all heard of probably a song or two from Initial D, but it does have that hard, impactful energy, and it's got a good mix between the J-pop vocals and the more metal backing. And it's in a way that doesn't sound out of place, and stylistically it works well, where kawaii metal as a genre might not be a great concept to those outside of a meme. Here it actually shows a lot of potential, and it shows a lot of success even, where you got songs like maybe Karate off the second album that kind of show that the style doesn't work as well. Here, the style works really well, and you get one of the best baby metal tracks here. Unfortunately, the song does sort of start a trend on the album where the chorus bangs. The chorus goes really hard, and you could tell they thought out the hooks on the chorus, but the verses don't exactly hit that much of a high point for me. They just seem kind of whatever. Not a real complaint. They seem pretty fine, but definitely did not excel as much as the choruses did. Next, we got a track that's actually partially in English called Elevator Girl. So this track is another example of the style just clashing in a weird way. It has this sort of trip hop intro, which I can appreciate experimentation as always, but it's just bizarre. And the English lyrics here are puzzling. And Babymetal, whenever they've done English in the past, you know, it has been a mixed bag. I mean, it's normally just like here or there, just a few words that like may or may not even make any sense. But here it's just saying that someone's going down in an elevator, and it's a woman going down in an elevator. I don't have a lot of background on this track, but to an English listener, it's a little weird. I didn't really understand it, and it didn't really convey an emotion that I could really latch onto too well. It didn't feel too inspiring or motivating. It was just kind of whatever. Yeah, the song was kind of puzzling, but I didn't hate it. I thought it was kind of fine. Next, we got the track Shanti Shanti Shanti, which starts the experimental trend of this album that I really didn't dig. A lot of tracks on this album dig into sort of different subgenres or even cultures of the world. I don't want to say it blends with world music, but if you want to say that, sure. This track is very Indian inspired, which has got sitar in the background, and the melodies are strong. Like Su-metal has these incredible vocal riffs that I think could have been on these albums the entire time, but here, obviously to pay homage to the style, you get the actual vocal parts, and they're really, really nice. And this is one of the more bouncy tracks, especially with that Indian drum sound. You hear that on definitely all over this track, and you probably heard it if you listen to a lot of Tool as well. So this track actually gave me really high hopes for the rest of the album to maybe hit these different cultural ideas in a sort of appreciative and effective way that really grows on the style, maybe something like folk metal. I know groups like Tengear Cavalry do that really strongly, and I'm sure there are a couple of Japanese metal groups that use more traditional Japanese instruments really effectively. I think Babymetal did at one point. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Next track is called O Magina, and it's got a feature from the vocalist of Sabaton, or Sabaton if you pronounce it that way. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a big fan of Sabaton. I think their style is just not great. You know, EU power metal is kind of cringe, honestly. It's just kind of overblown and really not as effective as American power metal. It's just the instrumentals are not as good, but fortunately you only get the vocals here. And normally the vocals he brings to the table are hard-hitting and effective, but he kind of tries like a semi-death growl thing here. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, this track is pirate metal. Su-metal sounds fine here, but the pirate metal thing with Joachim, I'm just so confused about why this is on the album. Like, this is an album called Metal Galaxy. Like, look at that cover. That is not, that's not Sabaton. And I don't think of Sabaton when I think of pirates. I know they have songs about ships and stuff, but aren't they about like fighting and not like drinking on the sea? I don't understand the instrumental at all here. I did think the chorus of this song was actually pretty satisfying, and definitely the most satisfying part of the song. Su-metal carries. This is probably the clearest example of Su-metal being the best part. And although the chorus is pretty satisfying, I do still have a complaint about that. The bass riff is so percussive, and normally that can be an okay thing if it's like slam metal, I guess, but just the way it's used here is like so... It honestly sounds like a joke. Like the distortion on Song 2 by Blur, where it's just so overblown and ridiculous that you're like, oh, that's funny. Except that song gets me hyped, and this just makes me cringe. The song's a total gimmick, and I skip it. It's not fun. I actually had to take like a good minute after listening to this track just to kind of recompose myself and get back into the album. The next track is Brand New Day, and it's actually featuring the guitarists of Polyphia. I am actually not that interested in however the heck you pronounce them. I've seen they recommended on YouTube, and they just seem like a semi-experimental sort of like progressive rock outfit that like... You know, neo-prog has never been my thing. I've only seen it like effective a handful of times out of the trove. I don't want to say treasure trove because they're not all good. Just the trove of neo-prog groups. And Polyphia has never really appealed to me in concept. But I must admit, the guitar playing on this track is pretty effective. There is a solo towards the end that's pretty rad. So the intro to this track is kind of weird, but kind of overwhelming as well. It's like this syncopated just portion of like guitars and everything crashing through, and then it pulls back a lot, and it's back and forth, and it's a weird way as an intro, but it actually becomes instrumental for the chorus. And with Su-metal singing over the top, it feels a lot more empowering and uplifting than it was in the intro, which I can understand the usage there. I actually kind of like it in the chorus. I just kind of wish they did like a different version for the intro. One thing I really liked about this track is that the build going into the chorus was really effective. It really found a good way to get me hyped before the chorus actually came in. But yeah, back on that guitar solo, it was pretty awesome, and there were even some nice harmonic parts, which I can always appreciate. And to round off the A side of this album, we have Night Night Burn. This is the other example of a cultural style being approached that I just don't get. It's either approaching like flamenco. The instrumental sounded a little flamenco-ish, even though it was just like in 4/4, which I'm pretty sure flamenco is not in 4/4 all the time. But something in here makes me want to think that it's Italian. I don't know any Italian music except for some Italian prog like Goblin and Alpha Taurus, but this is nothing like that. And honestly, it's weird. The lyrics here, not English, but there are some Italian. It says, Mamma Mia, probably... Well, it's already too many times if you say it once in a song, unless you're making a joke song, which, if this is a joke song, it's still kind of cringy, and I don't think it really belongs on the album. But, I mean, I've seen better joke songs. This is... Can you see how hard I'm struggling to explain how displeased I am with this track? Yeah, the only redeemable thing about this track is the chorus, and the choruses have been good pretty much every time on this album, but I hate trying to think of Babymetal trying to carry it with the chorus, when just their last album, they had a lot more progressive style that was less chorus focused and had a lot more interesting instrumentals and little jazz licks here and there, which I know that's a commie band thing, but this song leaves me aching for more, and also less. Anywho, side B, and I thought we were going to get a cool track here, but here's the thing. On an album, you normally have an intro track for the A side, and then you're done. It's an intro track. Maybe you have an intermission track here or there, but it's probably not much longer than a minute unless you're Tool and you make Negative Ions. But here we have another intro track called In the Name Of, and it's like 4 minutes in length. I don't know why Babymetal's just stylistic choices on this album are so weak. They're seriously weak on a lot of this, a lot more of it than it needs to be. Well, I thought the opening to this track was cool, it was dark, it was kind of menacing, and there's a riff that followed that was also pretty nice. And then we get vocals that are the death growls that we honestly haven't seen since Self-Titled. And it sounds like there's like a ritual going on for the fox god. I don't really know the lore, but that's what it sounds like. Honestly, this is just another track that makes the album feel unfocused and not quite sure where it wants to go, because while we did have the space angle, and then we hit the other cultures angle, now we have like the dark angle, which I'm totally fine with exploring the dark angle. I think if you're gonna approach another style in this album, this would be a better one, but just adding another one in there in the first place is kind of a mistake. Fortunately, this gets picked up with one of the better tracks on the album, Distortion. And so far, this is like one of 2 tracks that really give me the Metal Galaxy aesthetic that I thought was being approached here, which makes me kind of confused, because obviously the Babymetal albums so far have been kind of compilations of live material that I thought was good enough to redo in the studio and then actually apply for a studio album. But with the idea of Metal Galaxy, it seemed like the concept was supposed to be a lot stronger. Guess it's just not what we're getting. Anyway, I really like this track. I thought the drumming was excellent. You got these double kicks that were dark and thunderous and really, really satisfying. And I thought this track, honestly, if you put it at the very beginning of the album, it would have opened it perfectly. I thought sort of like the spoken word part that Su Metal does is a little edgy, and it works totally well. There is a breakdown that I didn't like that much, but other than that, I thought this track was totally fine, and it worked really well. The next track is called Papaya. This track sucks. So this song has like a hooky death growl. Death growl, I don't know, man. This album is leaving me weary. But basically the hook that is done to death, no pun intended, is a death growl from the commie member that does the death growls, which I've never found too appealing in the first place. In terms of a metal vocal style, I think it's one of the weakest ones I've ever heard. Fortunately, we got this guy named F Hero who was featured, who's actually a rapper, and his bars were kind of aggressive. At the beginning, actually reminded me a little bit of Denzel Curry. His part is the highlight of the track, and honestly, it's not even close. It's a little embarrassing how much he just carries this track. Su Metal is barely even on here. That leads me to a minor other complaint. So this is around the time that I think Moa Metal left the band, and we'll definitely see that with later tracks, because they're kind of an homage, but the Yell members of the band, they're just not contributing as much, which, I mean, I didn't always love their parts, but every once in a while they'd have something nice. I think on the self-titled, one of them actually had like their own like black metal vocal style, which was like really cool, and then it's just gone. Anyway, so we're at the last 4 tracks of the album, and so far this album has been incredibly disappointing. A lot of weird stylistic choices. This thing has left me kind of battered. Fortunately, these last 4 tracks carry the whole rest of the album. They really lift it back up to okay-ishness. First we got Kagurao. I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry. So it has this really nice but potentially derivative riff that's kind of groove metal influence that I actually was really digging. The chorus was very poppy and almost a little spacey with these dark guitars behind, and then it really showed the Metal Galaxy aesthetic coming back into fruition of the album. And it wasn't really incredible so far, but it was definitely satisfying. It has this sort of electronic drum bit, which normally I'm not that big of a fan of, but here I actually thought they worked pretty well. Now we reach the 3-part sort of like Shine or Galaxy series, if you will, and I gotta say, if it were a suite and they just connected a little more, or even were like one giant prog song, I would have kind of loved it. But as is, they're actually also still pretty great. First of all, we got Starlight, which is a goodbye to Yui Metal. Sorry, I said Moa Metal earlier on this review, but I meant Yui Metal. And it's also apparently maybe a goodbye to one of their former guitarists who apparently passed away while stargazing, and I think he fell or something, which is very, very sad. Rest in peace. But fortunately, I think he got a pretty nice sort of honoring with this track. This track is actually really awesome. This song has a really nice like thrash groove, which I thought was like pretty sick. And this track, honestly, so far was probably the most uplifting and inspiring track since the very beginning of the album. And in terms of an emotional height, this track reaches it like nothing has so far. It really makes me reminisce about previous albums from Babymetal. This track could have ended the album, but fortunately we get another 2 great tracks. Following that is Shine. So Shine has this really cool delayed intro, a delayed pedal, I mean. It's got this plucky part that's really satisfying. But this song is a true ballad, which Babymetal has not had that many of, but out of all their ballads, this is probably the strongest. I loved the riffing on this track. They were kind of proggy in the background with the way they were just running all around the fretboard. Su-Metal has a nice vocal climax on the last note of this whole track, and it really leads you out into the next track. The final track is Arcadia. So this kind of brings back an idea from actually Road to Resistance that I liked a lot, and it was the sort of Dragon Force-esque opening, except they layered symphonics on. I love this idea, and it really shows some of the best material on the album. This track builds well again, which has been a really nice precedent set from a couple tracks earlier, and I just can't get enough of this. The drums have this really nice thrash rhythm, and it just kind of reminds me about how like the drums earlier on the album were not nearly as effective, but here it's just that syncopated, like Dragon Force thrashy rhythm that everyone's come to know and love at this point. And this track is just shoveling energy on top of itself over and over again. It gets you really hyped. There's so many different instrumental sections, it's ridiculous. It all kind of builds into the chorus into these different ways, which I just love. I love the approach here. The construction of the song is masterful. And this ends the album beautifully with the way the guitars are just shredding, and then Su-Metal has another high note, and then they keep going, and then they drop, and you hear the symphonic vocals for just like a couple seconds, and then it's done. Awesome stuff. Really great way to end the album. But you can't have a great album off of 3 songs, and there wasn't that much more than 3 great songs on this album. So I get the experimentation on this album. I thought that was good, but it just didn't hit right with what it was experimenting with. A lot of the material here was actually kind of cringy. There were definitely a few tracks that were actually complete duds, like skips. I think this album strays far too much from the core idea, and every once in a while it hits an idea that I think would be an interesting way to expand the album in another direction, but it just never hits. And honestly, the core idea of this album doesn't go too far from their actually original idea of Babymetal self-titled. There are definitely some duds here, definitely unfocused, definitely just a lot of weaker moments, and not all the features are as appealing as they could be. But it's not terrible, because there are definitely some bangers here. I feel comfortable giving this a Reddit. A lot of highlights, a lot of lowlights. But fortunately, I was never bored here. So if you want something to get you on your toes, this album might be for you. If you're a Babymetal completionist, definitely give it a listen. There are a lot of strong tracks here. Some of Babymetal's best material is on here. Anywho, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, go ahead and comment down below. I'd love to talk to you guys. The response on these Babymetal videos have been awesome. I love talking with you guys about this. I hope you guys can find it in your heart to like and subscribe if you want to see my future videos. Obviously, no more Babymetal reviews until they release another album, but I'm sure I'm just going to cover that whenever it comes out. I hope you guys are having a good time out there. Hope you guys have a good day, and I hope to see you guys again soon.